Hi, this is Simon, creator of Legend of the Bones. Whilst I start every episode with a disclaimer that the show is intended for a mature audience, this episode has a segment which contains references to sexual violence and self-harm. To be clear, this is by no means intended to trivialise these subjects, nor present them as entertainment. Rather, because to deny they exist in my world would break the verisimilitude, and contest that some monsters are indeed monstrous. If you would rather not listen to that segment, then when you hear this music begin, be sure to skip forward around 2 minutes 10 seconds. Thanks for listening. Now, on with the show. This podcast is intended for a mature audience. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome back to Legend of the Bones. Following in the footsteps of giants, Legend of the Bones is a chimera. A mix of old-school tabletop RPG and dark fantasy storytelling. As its name might suggest, in Legend of the Bones the dice rule. There'll be no rerolls, no fudging the dice, no metacurrency. The roll of the bones will determine the character's destiny, and no one will be spared their fate. None shall escape the destiny of Bone. Last time on Legend of the Bones. In pursuit of the outlaws who had raided Lost Withel and kidnapped Abron's sister, Morwenna, the companions had ventured into the cellars of an old dilapidated hunting lodge, where the brigands were hiding. Having fought the guards and a direwolf in their lair, the companions had inadvertently alerted the remaining outlaws to their presence. Through his spell of clairvoyance, Valen witnessed the outlaws' response to the companions' intrusion, and in a strange ritual conducted by their leader, Oscallan, the gang transformed into a pack of Ulfhethnar, a type of werewolf. After hearing Valen's report, the companions fled the cellars, but were caught above ground by the pack. A desperate battle ensued, in which Canute's crewman, Kettle, was slain, and whilst ultimately victorious, every member of the party was badly injured. But little do they know that the extent of Beric, Valen and Arne's wounds means that each man is at risk of contracting lycanthropy, and themselves becoming an accursed Ulfhethnar. Chapter 53, Part 1, Day 51, Night. Party status: Beric, 13 out of 43 hit points. Lena, 17 out of 31 hit points. Valen, 3 out of 19 hit points. Talion, 18 out of 27 hit points. Canute, 21 out of 36 hit points. Arne, 11 out of 24 hit points. Abron, 12 out of 21 hit points. Spells available: Valen has memorised Push and Revive. Talion has memorised Resolve, Poetic Prose and Pitch. Lena can pray for 1 second level miracle. The quiet calm of the night. The soft burbling of the nearby stream, the gentle rustling of leaves, stood out in sharp relief against the violence which had raged a few minutes earlier. The companions, breathing heavily from the exertion, were bloodied and bruised. Valen, in particular, was badly wounded. His grey tunic was torn in several places and stained dark with blood. The mage sat, propped up against an old chest, his face bloodless, while Lena bound his wounds, her brow furrowed with concern, her hands trembling slightly as she worked, her heart aching for her lover. Beric and Canute had cut down the remaining 2 creatures which had been paralysed by Lena's miracle, and now the 2 warriors looked upon the naked corpses of their enemies. the outlaws no longer showed any sign that they were anything but human, and that in itself was disconcerting. Beric felt a mix of relief and unease, his mind racing with the implications of what they had just faced. "What were they?" he asked. The warrior's own wounds still bled, not least the 3 angry claw marks which ran across his brow, cheek and nose. He winced as he spoke, feeling the sting of sweat in his open wounds, his voice tinged with a mix of pain and curiosity.
Wolf Ethnar,
Canute replied grimly, his voice low and rough.
Wolf skins. I've seen one before, many years ago, in my homeland,
he explained, his eyes narrowing as he recalled the memory.
I was barely a man at the time. My father's skald told me they bore a terrible curse. It was he that told me they could not be killed by steel alone.
Fortunate for us that you remembered, Beric observed.
Aye. When I found this blade...
He held up the sword which he had found in the cellars, its edge glinting faintly in the moonlight.
And saw it was edged with silver. Something made me think to take it.
The Northman's eyes became distant, his expression softening with a mix of reverence and sorrow.
The ancestors truly do watch over us,
he said absently, and Beric guessed his cousin was thinking of his father. At that moment, Arne appeared with Talion and Abron.
My lord,
he addressed Canute respectfully by way of interruption, though his face was dark. Canute saw Arne's expression and read it in an instant, a knot forming in his stomach.
Kettle.
It was not a question. Arne shook his head. He fought valiantly, Talion announced. Then, understanding a little of Skarne culture, added, It was a good death. Canute nodded, then sighed.
Then he is fortunate, for now he drinks in Valhall, and the ancestors shall honor him.
And we shall honor him also, Beric added respectfully, knowing that Canute would feel compelled to bear the responsibility for his Oathman's death. But for now, we must find Abron's sister, and we must dare hope that she still yet lives. Lena came to join the men. The cleric had finished binding Valen's wounds, though the mage still sat, looking pale and drawn. How fare he? Beric asked. He will live, she reported, though her worry was plain to see, her voice trembling slightly. But he must rest. I pray I will be able to do more on the morrow. Then you should stay here with him, while we search for Morwenna. Lena nodded, then grasped Beric's arm with sisterly affection, her grip strong despite her fatigue, her eyes pleading with him to be safe. Be careful. Then looking to the others. All of you. The battle with the Ulfhethnar was certainly intense, and going into it, given the number of enemies, I did wonder if I might lose another main character. Now that is not to underestimate the impact for Canute in losing another of his crew. More immediately, during the fight, Beric, Valen and Arne all lost more than half their hit point total to attacks from the Ulfhethnar, and this means that they must now each pass a save versus death or contract lycanthropy. If they fail, it will certainly take the emerging story in a very unexpected direction. And with 3 rolls to make, it seems almost inevitable that at least one of the men will succumb to the curse. Okay, here we go. First up, Beric. The warrior must roll a 10 or more. A 13, lucky for Beric. Valen must roll an 11 or more. A 19, wow! The dice gods seem to be on the companion's side today. Can Arne also avoid the curse? The Skade will need to roll a 10 or more. An 18! Well, I have to say that there is part of me that is a little disappointed with those results. It could have made for a really interesting character development. But at the end of the day, the dice rule, for good or ill. Now before we get back to the narrative, I need to determine a couple of things, so it's time to consult the Oracle. Firstly, what of Morwenna's fate? Is Abron's sister dead? A 6. That's a yes and. Next, do the party find any evidence of a connection between Voskallen and the Brethren of the Purifying Light? A 4. That's a yes but. Okay, so do the companions find anything else of interest? A 6. That's another yes and. Interesting. I'm going to turn to the mythic event meaning chart for a prompt as to what that might be. Action first. 18. Move. Now the subject. 12. Opposition. Move opposition. Well, it really does seem that the dice have a story they want to tell. Finally, I rolled off might to see what, if any, treasure the companions might find within the Ulfhethnar lair. The result of which was 100 silver coins, an emerald worth 100 gold, and 3 silver arm rings. Okay, let's get back to the narrative. Chapter 53, Part 2, Day 51, Night. Party status. The party status is unchanged. Beric led, as he, Canute and Abron ventured once more into the dark cellars of the hunting lodge. The flickering torchlight threw uneven shadows across the rough stone walls, and the air clung to their skin like a damp veil. The musty aroma of earth and stone was now heavier, sharp with the coppery tang of blood and the acrid hint of animal musk. The companions had agreed that Arne and Talion would remain with Lena and Valen, partly in the event of unexpected encounters, but also to remove the bodies of the dead and secure the area as a place to make camp. For although the cellar may have offered safety, it reeked of violence and despair, and none had the heart to rest where the taint of the Ulfhethnar had lingered. Weapons at the ready, the 3 men made their way back to the hidden corridor, and then into the room in which the outlaw's transformation had taken place. The chamber was an assault on the senses, the stench of unwashed bodies mingling with the feral musk of lupine creatures. It clawed at their throats, leaving an oily film in their mouths. The air was thick and oppressive, making it difficult to breathe. The flickering torchlight cast eerie shadows on the walls, and together they gave the sense of the walls closing in. On the floor was a broken clay pot, from which a blue paste spilled, its surface slick and iridescent in the dim light. The substance oozed onto the compacted earth floor, its pungent herbal odour cutting briefly through the other foul scents. Beric nudged it gently with his boot, feeling the gritty texture beneath the leather. "Strange," he commented, his voice echoing slightly in the confined space.
"It's called woad,"
Canute explained, his tone hushed as if not to disturb the silence.
"I've seen it before among the Wela and the clansmen of Alban."
"What's its purpose?"
"I know not, other than I've seen some of their warriors fight naked, their bodies painted with it."
"Naked?" Beric exclaimed incredulously, his eyes widening.
"Aye, but mock not. They were some of the most savage men I've ever fought."
Canute gave a wry smile.
"It's why my kinsmen began to raid softer lands. Or so we thought."
Abron shifted restlessly, his hands clenched into fists. His pale face was tight with tension, and his gaze darted anxiously. The lost Willow man was clearly eager to find his sister.
"We must find Morwenna."
There was an urgency in his tone, and his expression was one of rising panic. Beric nodded in response, and the 3 men moved to the doorway on the west wall, leading to the unexplored parts of the cellars. While they were confident that no further outlaws lurked within, none were complacent. Blade in hand, Beric pressed his ear against the rough wood, but could hear no sound beyond. The silence was almost deafening. The warrior gripped the loop handle and pushed the door open. Its groan echoed through the stillness like a mournful wail. Beyond, a chamber some 25 by 15 feet was revealed. The room was brighter than the previous, with a couple of wall sconces providing both warmth and illumination, the orange glow softening the hard edges of the stone. On the south wall was another door, slightly ajar, from which a flicker of candlelight could be seen. In the centre of the room stood a table, upon which a large map was spread out. The parchment crinkled at the edges, and dark stains marred its surface, as though hastily discarded meals had been eaten over it. A lit candle in an iron holder burned low atop it, its wax dribbling like molten tears. Scattered pieces of parchment, some rolled, others haphazardly unfurled, littered the tabletop. Against the west wall was a large weathered chest, its iron bands tarnished with age. With no sign of Morena, Abon rushed towards the next room.
Wait!
Beric warned, but Abon would not be deterred. He flung open the door, but instead of moving through, he froze, and a moment later, he let out a great wail of despair. The two warriors moved quickly to see what had caused such a reaction, though in their hearts both anticipated the sight that would greet them. The small chamber beyond were sleeping quarters. There was no bed, but the floor was covered with scattered furs and blankets. What might once have been warm and inviting was now a grisly scene of horror. The furs were soaked through with congealed blood, their dark stains stark against the once soft fibres. Lying among them was the naked body of a comely, fair-haired young woman. Her lifeless eyes stared blankly at the ceiling, and her throat had been savagely cut. From the marks on her body, and from her torn dress, it was clear that she had been horrifically violated. What's more, in her own hand, her white fingers were clasped around a bloodied knife. Abon staggered forward, his knees buckling beneath him. A strangled cry escaped his lips as he collapsed, his trembling hands reaching out. He fell upon the furs, cradling the woman's body in his arms, as great shuddering sobs racked his frame. Beric knew that feeling all too well. How the weight of loss bore down like a stone upon one's chest, making every breath an agony. No words of comfort would suffice. No act of kindness could heal the wound. Time might dull the edges, but the scar would forever remain. He gestured to Canute with a tilt of his head, and the two men left the woodsman to his grief. Moving to the table, the pair observed the map. The cartography was skillfully rendered, showing the Paranmore Peninsula in a surprising level of detail. The geography was not unfamiliar to Beric. He remembered Valen showing them a similar map after meeting the mage back at Pencareth, and the warrior found himself absorbed in the intricacies of settlements, forests and hills.
What's this?
Canute announced abruptly. The Skarne had been searching through the various parchments. Most he had discarded on the floor as irrelevant, but one had clearly piqued his interest.
What have you found?
Beric inquired, his attention brought back to the room.
An instruction.
The Skarne looked up at his cousin.
But more importantly, information. It would seem Ross Callan was working for El Forcano.
The man responsible for the attack on Four Rivers?
Aye. Long has he been a thorn in Lord Conwyn's side, and as we now know, is in the employ of Polmir's steward.
The Brethren, Beric muttered in contempt, then cursed. Canute let his cousin vent frustration for a moment before continuing.
Ross Callan was sent by Kano with an order to raid villages along the River Nade.
But why?
To distract Lord Petrock and draw some of his forces away from supporting the king. 4 rivers must have been the start. By causing trouble in the lands of the king's most loyal eldermen, they weaken the crown before they strike.
Beric considered this for a moment. But will that not lead to Colwyn and Petrock fortifying their borders with the southern lords, making an attack on the king more difficult?
It would, except that is not where they will strike. Look.
Canute moved to the map and placed his finger on a stronghold called Kero Morthal. Valen had been slowly teaching Beric his letters, and the big man awkwardly read the name aloud. He noted that the fortification was on the southern side of the Dragonspine Mountains, which ran east-west along the middle of the peninsula. If the mountains had not been there, the stronghold was no more than 60 or 70 miles from the capital, Trevance. To the north, on the mountain range itself, something else was written. Dragon's Tooth Pass. Beric read aloud, and the realization struck him immediately. They will go through the mountains. Understanding the relative geography of a fantasy setting over an audio medium isn't always easy, so if you'd like to see an actual map of the Paramore Peninsula, then you can find one in the map section of legendofthebones.blogspot.com. Needless to say, the companions have stumbled upon some important intelligence over the rebel plans. Unfortunately, at this time, they have no way of sharing this with Lord Cornwyn, and this may call their current plans into question. For now though, given the hour and their injuries, the companions will need to make camp for the night. On that basis, I think I'm going to check for a wandering encounter. A roll of 1 or 2 on a d6 will indicate that there will be an event during the night. A 6. After an uneventful night, every character will recover 1 hit point through natural healing. In addition, Lena is now able to pray for miracles of healing. Given the gravity of his injuries, Lena will pray for Valen to be healed by the miracle of Cure Serious Wounds. The cleric will need to roll a 17 or less for her casting roll. A 6. Valen is healed for 10 hit points. Next, the cleric will pray for Beric to be healed twice using Cure Light Wounds, rolling 2 d20s for Lena's prayer rolls. An 8 and a 9. Beric is healed for a total of 10 hit points. Now, whilst it took the party around 2.5 hours to reach the hunting lodge from Lost Withel, they now have access to 6 horses, which, even with 2 characters doubling up, will reduce the time to return to little more than an hour. Even so, given that they are travelling through a forest, I think it is appropriate to check for a wandering encounter. A 4. Nothing. Okay then. Chapter 53, Part 3, Day 52, Morning. Party status: Beric, 24 out of 43 hit points. Lena, 18 out of 31 hit points. Valen, 14 out of 19 hit points. Talion, 19 out of 27 hit points. Canute, 22 out of 36 hit points. Arne, 12 out of 24 hit points. Abron, 13 out of 21 hit points. Spells available: Valen has memorized Push, Shield, Soothe, Revive, Clairvoyance, and Ignite. Talion has memorized Resolve, Poetic Prose, Pitch, Imbue, and Lullaby. Lena can pray for 2 second level miracles and 1 third level miracle. In contrast to the night before, the woodland of Cwsgwrth was alive with light and sound. The canopy of oak, ash and birch cast dappling shade across the forest floor under a clear blue sky. the scent of wildflowers mingling with the earthy aromas of soil, while the birdsong of blackbird, robin and the occasional chiffchaff filled the air in a chorus that celebrated the arrival of summer. Beneath the trees, ferns and brambles thrived, their vibrant green hues striking a contrast to the delicate sunlit patterns that danced on the ground. The companions had broken camp shortly after dawn, eager to return to Lost Withel. They moved steadily through the forest, their horses' hooves muffled by the soft, leaf-strewn earth. They spoke little, their voices hushed beneath the dense canopy of early summer leaves. It was not because they wished not to disturb the birdsong that surrounded them, rather that their mood was subdued, for not only had they failed to rescue Morwenna, but a man had seemingly lost his life for naught. Beric and Canute led, riding at a trot side by side. Lena and Valen shared a mount behind them, as did Talion and Abron. Arne, meanwhile, brought up the rear, leading the final horse over which the shrouded bodies of Kettle and Morwenna were borne. At the head of the party, the two warriors rode in silence, each dwelling on their thoughts. Beric found himself remembering his uncle Sigferth teaching him how to play Taefl. He had not yet seen 10 summers when he had been introduced to the game, and he had been fascinated by the carved wooden pieces which represented the soldiers of two opposing armies. He remembered how his uncle never let him win, despite his Aunt Brona chiding him to do so.
Only by experiencing defeat will the boy learn to win,
Sigferth had said after delivering a particularly crushing loss. Later, once Beric's tears had subsided, his uncle sought him out. Sigferth was not an educated man, but his mind was as sharp as any who had been.
Things won too easily are rarely valued,
He counselled empathetically, then gave some rare advice.
To win in Taefl, Beric, you must learn to look beyond your nose, beyond your next move. You must think ahead, and all the while anticipate what your opponent will do.
Beric snorted as the memory shifted, and Canute looked over to him.
What's on your mind, cousin?
Taefl, Beric replied.
A fine game. Do you play?
Canute asked, the subject lifting him from his own introspection.
I used to, with my uncle.
The warrior's eyes were distant.
I only ever beat him once, but by the end of that night, he was dead.
Canute said nothing. It was pointless to do so.
It matters not. It was a lifetime ago.
Beric continued.
But it strikes me that our enemy has been playing Taefl.
He looked over at Canute with a grim smile.
And now, we must also. Thank you for listening to Legend of the Bones. I hope you've enjoyed the show. If you like what you've heard, then please consider rating and reviewing the show in your podcatcher of choice. Not only do I love seeing the feedback, but it really does help the show reach new listeners. As always, where would I be without my amazing cast of voice talent? A newcomer to the show, playing the role of Beric's uncle, Sigferth, is Ben Newbon. Ben is a game designer and the host of Cybertopia, an actual play podcast using his own TTRPG system of the same name. Returning to the show in the role of Abron is Jim Hurst. Jim is a talented composer and music producer who has collaborated with me this season on the songs performed by Talion. And finally, returning once again in the role of Canute is Jon Cohen, creator of Tale of the Manticore. My sincere thanks to all of you for your support. I am, as always, incredibly grateful. I'll put these wonderful folks' links in the show notes. You could also help by liking or reposting new episode announcements, or by recommending the show online or to a friend. You really can't beat the power of word of mouth.
Alternatively, if you'd like to show your appreciation by buying me a metaphorical cup of tea, then I have a Ko-fi page at ko-fi.com/Legend of the Bones. Any donations will go towards the show's running costs. If you're interested, I also have a range of merchandise, which can be found at redbubble.com/people/legendbones/shop. To keep the cost down to you, all items are presented at zero markup. I make no money from them. It's purely to give something back to fans of the show. I'd also love to know what you think of the show, and I do respond to every message I receive. So with that in mind, you can contact me on X at LegendBones, Blue Sky at LegendBones, Mastodon at LegendBones at ttrpg-hangout.social, Instagram at LegendOfTheBones, email at legendofthebones@gmail.com, or go to legendofthebones.blogspot.com for show notes, house rules, character profiles, art, maps and more. Join me next time to find out what awaits our adventurers as the bones decide their fate. None shall escape the destiny of Bone.
Have you been looking for a break from the drudgery of the real world? What if the future wasn't so bleak? What if someone was to save us all? How would that look?
I must know, does your microwave gun go ding when it's done shooting?
Well, you're in luck, because Cybertopia is a rules-light TTRPG actual play that explores just such a reality.
We've got this disco ball, which is pretty cool. We've got these 2 drones flying around in here, dodging in and out of the smoke.
Check us out on your podcast app of choice, and hear our rolling cast of 16 fantastic players take on weird and wild missions that the corporate overlords need taken care of for totally altruistic and benevolent reasons.
Okay, this time it's serious. I would like to turn my hacking hat backwards.